Alright guys, welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back to Tomboy Official. So on this episode, continuing some of these topics that have been coming up. I have a friend in North Carolina who sent me an article that I'm looking into and not really fully knowledgeable about this. It says, now you guys know I'm not a news person. I'm not I don't follow the news. I don't really follow a lot of politics, but I try sometimes to follow at least like things that would more directly affect me or people who I know. So with a lot of LGBT stuff, there's definitely a lot of concerns. So I was looking at this article. It's from myfox8.com, the website. Now, I'm not saying that, Fox or whatever. Like, I don't know any of that kind of stuff. Like, I just know that people complain about left or right or all. Like, I don't know. I watched a little bit of the video clip, and it says, for the title, New Parents' Bill of Rights to ban sexuality curriculum through 4th grade passes North Carolina Senate committee. So let me see if it says any more in writing. They say that the bill was, according to this article, and we can try to dissect it as much as possible, but there's a new bill that was basically focusing on topics of transparency, communication, age-appropriate curriculum, and the latest version was coined Parents' Bill of Rights. And it was going to give lawmakers an opportunity about this topic that was previously not passed before. They say it's called Senate Bill 49, is what it's called, and it was approved yesterday, and let me see. I'm trying to get to the meat of it. It says, in quotes, state employees, including school personnel, must not keep secrets about students from their parents. And then another quote, parents have rights that we do not give up when we send our children to public-run schools. Parents are not afterthoughts. Parents are charged with raising their children as they see fit, not in the way parents or other school employees see fit. I don't know where that quote ends, but there's another quote that starts, and it says, the government is not a partner in raising our children. And, I mean, for a person like me who doesn't have kids, I don't really know how much I can really add, but I do have opinions. So basically it says, so the bans are banning curriculum about gender identity, sexual activity, and sexuality in grades K through 4. And age age-appropriate discussions about how schools should handle if students change their preferred pronouns, and requirements that would make it so that the schools would make textbooks and other materials available for parents to view. Parents want to be more involved in their students' education. There should be more transparency and trust. Two of the politicians were saying that that the bill was not about, in quotes, "don't say gay," and does not get into the issue of sexual orientation other than the pronoun reference as a point to be communicated. The broader term of, quote, "sexual activity" was employed to remove gender issues. So it says that the bill is different from the House Bill 755 that was passed last spring. That was an augmented version of a bill introduced. Okay. Dude, these articles are like all over the place. It's not written in a very linear, well, it's kind of linear, but it's not getting to the point. All right, whatever. I'm skipping parts. So it says so Gailey, whatever her name is, Amy Gailey, however you say her name, she got grilled by committee members speaking against the Parents' Bill of Rights. And also from the public, and a conservative foundation. They're basically saying that the bill needs to have transparency. So I think they're arguing about the transparency and not wanting the schools to take such a role in teaching gender identity related topics instead of not sexuality from K through 4, but teaching about gender identity. And okay, so let me see. Yeah, I was wondering the same thing about the limitations of teachers. And they said that, how they were asked to be social workers. I mean, no. I don't know about that. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Because I feel like there's a certain population of the country or whatever who seems to be so against learning new things that are new to them. They don't want to learn any of it. Just because they don't want to learn doesn't mean that it's like a social worker's, it's in a social worker's lane and not in the lane of a parent. I feel like there's like an underlying problem that people aren't stating. I feel like what's happening is a lot of these parents want their kids to be ignorant to knowing about these things, assuming that the kid is gonna maybe get confused about their gender or their sexuality. I don't really think. I mean, maybe K through 4. I think the discussion has to happen eventually. I don't think it has to be maybe K through 4. I mean, I don't really know how much they need to know, like, but usually kids who are K through 4, like, if they're having questions about sexuality and gender, they're going to be having them by those ages anyways. Like, I've worked with kids to some extent for multiple years, and there were always a handful of kids that were a little on the sexual end. Like, they weren't like doing sexual things to each other, but it was like, for example, I knew a kid who, I've talked about this before, who sometimes would bring his mom's bras to work to show to his friends. And he also, would, when he got a chance, he would wear like a wig. Just as like he got in trouble for this too, but he put on a wig that was like a girl's hair wig. He didn't have any of the other clothing, nothing like that, just the wig. It was kind of like trying to act with female mannerisms. I wouldn't say that this kid was trans or non-binary or had any gender issues. He definitely had a curiosity about femininity. And it wasn't like it was happening all the time. Like, there was a boy that he used to kiss in one of the tube slides. They got caught doing this multiple times. I don't know much about the other boy, but I know he was a pretty quiet kid, but those two would be making out in the slides. They were in kindergarten, and I knew this kid all the way till he went into second grade or maybe third grade, and he was still doing the same things. He didn't learn it at the school. The school didn't teach anything like that. He learned this on his own. The other boy, they didn't teach it in school. They were in the same school, same grade. I knew other kids that, would kind of do like a little bit of like, when they were even in like preschool, like 3-4 years old, they'd go play dress up, and there would be a couple boys that would, well, at least one that I can remember, that would dress in, like, he would always choose dresses and heels and wigs and things like that. He never used any of the quote unquote like dad clothing. He always wanted to be the mother and all these other things. Today, on occasion, he does drag. Not often. On occasion, he does drag, like once or twice a year tops, if that. And on very rare occasions he does drag. And then, like, he's a gay guy. But yeah, there was nothing about the gender expression stuff that really had anything to do with his sexuality. They were completely unrelated. And back then, none of us were really using, at least in that environment, nobody was using like different gender affirming type of terminology. It didn't come up in any of our Christian textbooks. It wasn't a conversation when I was in that age range at all. Like, these conversations weren't coming up around me at all. Like, I definitely always had like a certain preference for certain clothing styles and toys and activities and things like that, and just an aversion towards other stuff. Nobody taught me that. Nobody was like, you have to play with dolls, like, don't play with trucks or whatever. Like, nobody taught me any of these things. I knew from looking around, and I think most people who have different types of gender related experiences or sexuality related experiences that aren't hetero or cis, I think most people realize that pretty young. I'd say sometimes as early as maybe 3, 4, usually by 5 or so, and then when you're in kindergarten, you're around kids all day, so it's like that's when the conversations start happening, where you're not only just talking to your parents or siblings or whatever, or family members. You're away from your family members for a lot of the day, every day, most of the week, talking to other kids your own age. So there's definitely an education factor there, where it's like the kids who are doing these things or have these things going on for themselves, they're the ones who, even if the school doesn't educate them, these kids are still going to be talking to other kids, so there's no way, that the other kids aren't going to know about it, unless they stay off the internet and never go online and probably never watch anything ever media related, and don't talk to anybody at school, ever. I doubt that most kids before 4th grade aren't going to know at a public school. I mean, I highly doubt that they're not going to find out. And I'm not sure why some parents would rather their kids find out about this either just on their own, or not at school from a teacher. They'd rather have them learn from their peers. I mean, if I had to choose, I'd choose a teacher to teach my kids about these things. I mean, definitely I would teach them far better and more details about things compared to what the school would do. But to completely ignore these things when they're so apparent in society, and when it's part of daily life, when you're interacting with different types of people. I mean, there are going to be kids that come to those schools that are going to be non-binary kids. There are going to be gay kids that come to those schools before 4th grade that are going to be open and out. And how are people going to address that? They can't just ignore it. Like, what's the teacher just going to ignore it? And the school's going to just ignore it? And then all the students are supposed to just ignore it? Like, kids are inquisitive, and they know when adults are making something strange out of a situation and making it a taboo and making it like a weird negative thing just because they don't talk about it. Like, kids ask so many questions, and I remember when I was a kid, I used to ask questions all the time, and I noticed there were some questions people didn't answer, and I kind of I didn't really mind it. But I noticed when I got older, to me, that's definitely a sign of like a toxic environment. Oftentimes when there are people who have educational knowledge, scientific knowledge, historical knowledge, and they're declining to educate. I don't think that helps. I mostly experienced that through like a church, where it was like, when you ask questions about the Bible or different kind of like things, and then they would be like, they would just never talk about certain stuff or never really fully give me an answer. They wouldn't say I don't know, they wouldn't say I don't want to talk about it, but they would kind of not expand or not explore it with me. Like, I could tell when they didn't want to talk about certain things, and to me that was a flag that would go off in my mind, like, why don't they want to talk about this? And to me that made me more suspicious of like, they're definitely hiding something. It's like, well, you tell us to do this, but how come the other sentence we don't do that? Or the sentence before the sentence that you said to do, we don't do the one before that either. And then I think people just, it all comes down to, they were trying to control people. They can't just say that, but it's like, well, you have to follow the traditions and the rules. And I feel like this is kind of another form of that. It's like they're trying to control people by keeping them in the dark. But it's not, I don't think it's going to make it less likely that kids are out as gay, or that kids, are aware of like their gender differences. just because they know a term, they're not going to be like, oh, I'm this now, or I'm confused about it now. Like, I think there could be a population that experiences that, but I don't think it would be the majority of people. Like, for example, when I was growing up, this is a completely different topic almost, but when I was growing up, I had a couple friends who wanted to be black. There were white kids who wanted to be black. They wished that they could be because of where they were raised and the neighborhoods they were from. That was kind of what was around them, was black people. I had black friends who wanted to be white, and they would pray about, I want to be white when I grow up, and things like that. And it's like, there were no discussions, in school about like ethnicity and races and stuff like that, like at a young age. But it's like, you kind of have something going on internally within yourself that you kind of notice different identifying factors, your own preferences, things like that. Like, that happens early in life. I think it's a part of development that goes overlooked, that people don't really talk about. But for me, from being around kids for so long and, just kind of, I feel like if it's happening in an environment where kids are already being taught that it's wrong and they're not talking about it, and I was the one that was kind of finding out about certain stuff and aware of it happening, then it's definitely going to be happening at public schools and other places. Probably even more so, because the school I went to, people would get in trouble for doing certain things or saying certain things. So yeah, I really just don't know. Like, I don't understand what the problem is. I mean, for ages K through 4, the reason why I feel like it's not an issue to talk about it is because I don't think it's gonna damage anything. At an age appropriate level, it's not gonna damage anything. The kids who are having the gender difference experiences are already having them during that phase in their life. They've already started having those types of thoughts and feelings. There's nothing you can do to make it go away. Like, it's still gonna happen, with or without the school teaching it as part of a curriculum. And even for the parents, if they don't want to teach their kids, nowadays, you can find any information. Like, you're not stuck without information. Like, I was talking a little bit with a friend about this. I was saying, in our day and age, in our generation back in the day, we didn't really have internet. Like, we did, but it wasn't like something we used. Those of us who are in like our mid-30s now, approaching our 40s, like, we didn't have that. We didn't have internet that you could actually like look stuff up on and find a lot of answers. Like, not during K through 4. Like, yeah, we did have internet and computers and stuff, but we didn't have, like, we weren't using them like we did today. Like, it was kind of like, use them as needed. If you can get extra credit for an assignment or type it out, you would do that. Otherwise, if you had to write like a bit of a paper, you'd search. But like, I don't think that we were using Google. Like, we had like, I don't know how many search engines back in the day, and they weren't all equally good. And you would search stuff, and sometimes you wouldn't even find the information you were looking for. And yeah, like, I think it didn't get easier to search stuff till like the internet got better. But I mean, when I was K through 4, I don't even think we were learning to type yet, honestly. Like, I don't know what we were doing. Like, we had a computer, I think, in every classroom, and on rainy days there was like a game where you could play where some like character would be like eating letters and spelling things or whatever. It was like a typing game, or like there were like 2 or 3 educational type games we could play on the computer, and otherwise I don't remember us ever using it. I remember we had Encarta. I think it was like a type of like encyclopedia CD-ROM type thing. We didn't really have a whole lot to go by, honestly, with computers. We didn't have smartphones, we didn't have tablets, we didn't have laptops. Like, that wasn't like a normal thing when I was in K through 4 age range. We had old computers. Like, we had I remember our house had a black, it had floppies, like the black floppy disk where you had to load 2 of them. One of them was the operating system and the other one was the actual software that you were trying to run. And the screen was it was black with like, I don't know if it's black with orange letters or orange with black letters. And you could draw on there. There was like a paint type program. I think it had a word processor, but I don't know how to use it. And I think there was another game on there that I used to like that I never actually understood how to play. Very basic stuff. That's what I had when I was in kindergarten, 1st grade. Like, it wasn't a functional tool for me. Like, the computer wasn't something I used in a functional way. It was like an extra thing that was there that was like, you got to learn how to use this thing. And it's like some technology that would like sit in the corner till somebody needed it. It wasn't like today where it's like you got it in your pocket, you need it on you at all times. You have to have it with you, or else you don't even know what's in your bank. You don't know how to call anybody. You don't know the directions to anything. You know, like, we're so reliant on our smart devices, cell phones. But yeah, I just don't know. Like, that's kind of how I grew up. So it's hard for me to really compare that type of an experience to what a K through 4 K through 4 grade range would go through. Nowadays, it's like, I don't even know how they use the internet. Like, there's so much stuff on there that it's like, I don't even know, they're allowed on YouTube. They're allowed on, some of them go on TikTok, Instagram. They're on social media. They're searching online. They're playing games. They're like engaged with social media content. Usually it's supposed to be at an age appropriate level, but I don't know how that is happening. I don't think that there's a way that kids are going to be able to avoid all of these things unless they shut out everything online and everything on the television. And even then, if you go to the airport, there's a TV. If you go to the gas station, there's a little TV. If you go to a lot of different waiting room types of places, there's TVs there. If you go to a restaurant to pick something up for takeout, there's a lot of times TVs there. Sometimes it's just sports or whatever, or news, but there are often TVs everywhere. Like, and advertisements all over the place too. And so I don't really know how a kid would not absorb some of the information, especially because they're going to see it around, right? They're going to be watching TV. There's going to be gay people on TV. There's going to be people with just different gender identities all over the place. Maybe they're not in Barney or something like that, but, they're going to come across somebody or something, or some content or some person in real life, and they're not going to know how to communicate about it or what it is or what's going on. To me, that's kind of scary. It's like, why would we want to bring up a whole generation of people who's just as ignorant as the other generations? Like, I think it's time to kind of move forward. And I would want to think, who are my kids going to be around past grade 4? As they gain more and more independence, they're going to be going out places. Like, I don't know, when I was probably around maybe 7th, 8th grade or so is about when I started going places with my friends without my parents being there. Yeah, I would go to the mall mostly. Mostly it was just the mall. Just go hang out at the mall all the time. Or go to different parks or the beach and play sports and stuff. And, there were plenty of times when we weren't with our parents. And, there were plenty of people that I came across and met that, I never learned about in school or learned about, at all, I learned all that just because I was a very social person and because I valued, socializing with diverse cultures. So I was never like, okay, if this person is, they say that them and their family lives in a shelter, I'm not going to be like, oh, that's weird, let me not hang out with that kid. Like I had friends that were homeless, I had friends that were super wealthy, I had friends that were on different types of government assistance, friends that had like multiple family members and roommates and housemates living in their houses. I had friends with mansions, friends who were too embarrassed to even show you where they lived, people whose parents I never even got to meet because they were abusive, people whose parents I did get to meet that were abusive. I met all kinds of people and all different races, ethnicities, language, language, education, different things happening in the households. There's kind of a funny story that, I grew up in this neighborhood where we had so many kids on the street. There was this one family of kids. There were 3 of them. There were the brothers, Christian and Leif. They were kind of like naughty kids. They were always just like causing trouble. And then there was the girl who I was friends mostly with her because she was my age more so. The other guys were like a couple years older, so they didn't really tend to hang out with most of us. And yeah, they'd always be like play fighting and like cursing and stuff. But that girl, their parents had a live-in housekeeper, and the housekeeper spoke Spanish. And my friend was always like really whiny because, the housekeeper would tell her to come inside. She'd have to come inside or do chores or, do homework or whatever she had to do. And so she'd always, the housekeeper preferred her to not just be playing outside all the time. And so the housekeeper would tell her, come inside, it's time to come inside. The parents weren't there. This was during like the daytime when the parents weren't home yet. And, they would tell her to come inside, and she would start crying almost all the time and whining. And she'd be like, ¿Por qué? ¿Por qué? And I probably lived in that house for like, I don't know how long we lived there, like probably almost 10 years or something like that. And I thought for a lot of my life that housekeeper's name was Porque. I didn't know that meant why. I didn't know that was Spanish for like why, like she was just like why, she'd be just like crying like why, I don't want to go inside, like why, but she was just a whiny kid like that. She would whine with her parents and stuff too. But things like that, I wasn't exposed, surprisingly, I wasn't exposed to Spanish at a very, very early age. Like, I had people around me that spoke Spanish, definitely plenty of neighbors that spoke Spanish, but I didn't really have any, like, understanding of it. I knew some of the slang and, like, some of the cursing and things like that, but it was just funny. Like, and I just use that as an example because it's like, okay, when you're not exposed to something that's all around you, I mean, you eventually catch on, like later on when I learned Spanish a little bit more, I was like, oh, that's what that means. Like, and I recognized that word because my friend used to say it all the dang time to the housekeeper. And so there was that. There was also, so yeah, there was the housekeeper situation, but I mean, yeah, I'm trying to think if, I don't know where I learned about queerness. Like, I knew about it because I remember I had a friend that came out to me when I was in like 3rd or 4th grade, so I already knew what it was. And the first kind of crush I ever had on someone that was female, I was in about 3rd grade or so, or maybe 4th grade. And I remember being like, now I know this is something that I'm not really supposed to tell people that I'm attracted to. Like, I didn't really know what was going on. I was just kind of like, I never heard about this before, so I should probably keep my mouth shut. And I definitely knew that for sure. I don't think I recognized that, this is gay, I don't think I knew specifically that that's what it was. I kind of knew maybe it was in that realm, but I don't think I really knew exactly what I was feeling or experiencing. And I eventually figured it out, and with no help from school, parents, church, friends, any of that, I figured it out on my own for the most part. And so I don't think that there's really much that people can do to keep kids from being aware of certain gender and sexuality related things. They're interested in it, whenever kids see someone who has a gender expression that's a little different from the stereotype, they'll ask questions. They'll be like, oh, like, why does that boy dress like that? Or why does this girl why is that boy wearing nail polish? Or like, why does he have a purse? And things like that. Like, kids will ask questions. They want to know what is happening, because they're like, oh, like, that doesn't match maybe what I've been taught or what I've seen most days. Like, what's going on, And what, are parents just going to ignore it and just be like, don't worry about it? You know what I mean? Like, what are they going to say, These kids are going to come across, other kids, other teachers, other staff. They can be at a doctor's office. There can be certain doctors. You can be at a church even. There's going to be queer people in your congregation. I don't think there's a way to avoid it. And I think it's not going to do any help to avoid it. But so one of the quotes in this article says, sexual activity and orientation have no place in K through 4 classrooms. That's for parents alone. Leave adult issues out of K through 4 curriculum. So I don't know. I really just don't know. I think at the least they should have terminology, give some vocabulary for some topics, and a sentence explanation. I don't think that would be too overstepping. And when it comes to like sexual activity, I don't think 5-year-olds need to know like how people have sex necessarily. I could see how people wouldn't want that. But by the time someone's in 4th grade, some kids hit puberty at like 4th grade, 3rd grade. Like, how are they gonna not have any conversation about any of this stuff ever? Until when? Like, I remember in my school, I think our sex ed started in 5th grade, 6th grade. I think, I don't remember, but I remember we did have like health, science, biology, those types of topics. I don't remember what we learned before those grades. I don't remember having sex ed before that, like an actual official sex ed. or any talks about like what certain genitalia is called and all that kind of stuff. But even before 5th and 6th grade, I was already developing crushes on people, you know. I'd already started hitting puberty around that age. So I don't know if I knew what was going on. I remember my mom would talk about, she'd always be like telling me that I had to wear like a bra or something. And I would just get so annoyed. Like, I was just like, I don't want to. Like, why does she keep like bothering me about this? Like, I don't think I actually was wearing one until I was in like 7th grade, maybe some in 6th grade, but mostly in 7th grade is when I started, because I had to use the locker room for PE. So it was more of like a peer pressure type thing. Like, I know everyone else is gonna have a bra, so I gotta have one. I can't just be like half nude walking around. Like, like you have to have like the appropriate underwear. You can't have like weird underwear. So I went multiple years. And yeah, like I can't really think about, I feel like the thing is, I feel like my life was very limited in what people wanted to teach, because it was a private school and it was very conservative, to a point where, even the teachers that were teaching sex ed weren't having sex with people. They'd never had sex. They were young adults, like in their 20s, maybe 30s. If they weren't married, they weren't expected to really be having sexual experiences with anybody. And so, and most of my teachers weren't married when I was younger. And so most of them didn't know a lot about sexual things. Like, they would be giggling and laughing and, embarrassed to like talk about anything. And I would say that my 5th and 6th grade sex ed class still wasn't a good age to learn a lot, because the teacher was flawed in teaching with that topic. And so the teacher couldn't teach, a lot. Basically, they made it kind of like a cop-out, where we would have to play these like Jeopardy games. We mostly learned through like Jeopardy and stuff that made it so she didn't have to explain anything. We basically learned from, fill in the blanks, and like worksheets and stuff, like match this body part to this label kind of thing. Coloring pages and stuff, like familiarity with anatomy and like how to make babies. Basically, we didn't really learn anything past that. And it was all cross sections of like internal organs and stuff. Like, you never saw a nipple or a butt cheek or a labia or a testicle or a part of a penis or anything. Like, it was all just like internal organs. I would say it was age appropriate. I would say that was age appropriate. Like, you kind of understand what's going on with like the basics of stuff. And they taught like basic stuff about what puberty looks like, for what age ranges or whatever, kind of things that happen during puberty. It was a very hetero cis type of learning, with just like basic anatomy and science. There wasn't, because it was attached to a religion, there was a lot of teaching about like all the stuff that you're not supposed to do because of the religion. But as far as the sex part, they made it as uninteresting as, like, it was almost like disconnected. Like, you could be having like emotionally and mentally like sexual experiences at that age range, and the stuff that we learned in the class, you wouldn't even think that it was the same thing. Like, it was just like, oh, this is science, and like some other body parts that we didn't know some names to, and if you put this one inside that other one, then it's possible that somebody might have a baby if this other thing happens. And it's like, I don't really think, like, we didn't talk about love, we didn't talk about relationships, we didn't talk about crushes, we didn't talk about marriage too much, like dating. We didn't talk about any of that kind of stuff ever in school, and ever at any of those classes, even later on. And I was in that school till like 10th grade. We didn't talk about or learn about any of it. And I think it should be mandatory to learn about, relationship skills and things like that. Like, a lot of people don't learn about that, and that's why they don't know how to have good ones. But yeah, I noticed that, we, it's easier for me to talk about my own experiences because that's what I have firsthand knowledge of. But when I try to like think about, if somebody K through 4 was learning that same book I started learning in 5th and 6th grade, that wouldn't be age appropriate. Like, it was appropriate, I think, for that age range. K through 4, I think kids are going to have questions. I would understand if they wanted to learn from their parents. The only issue I have is that it is going to be up to the schools to teach kids stuff. They can't just avoid it because parents don't want to talk. Like, I feel like if there's certain stuff that parents don't want their kids to learn, like, ever, then they should send them to private schools that don't teach those things. Because even at the school I went to, there was a lot we didn't learn, for sure, that I knew the public school kids were learning because I hung out with them, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, where'd you learn that, Like, we didn't know anything. Like, they kept us completely in the dark about stuff. But then I saw my kids, I saw my friends when they hit college, and a lot of them went to very conservative Christian schools and lost their minds. Like, they all got into, like, some strange, like, sexual confusion and exploration that was maybe not the safest, and into substances and all sorts of stuff because they were so sheltered from it and didn't know, like, they didn't even know, like, harm reduction approaches and stuff like, safety, like, they weren't taught, like, how to, consider another person in a relationship and all these other things. They weren't taught about any of that stuff from the school. A lot of their parents might have taught them. A lot of the parents I know didn't teach their kids. Like, my parents never had, like, a whole, like, sit down, talk about sex kind of thing. I'm glad that they didn't. Like, I don't want to, I'm not really into talking to them about that kind of stuff, but they never did. And so, like, when I think about it, I'm like, I don't even know what my parents know. I mean, they clearly know how to have kids, but it's like, even when it comes to LGBT stuff, like, I barely am noticing that they're kind of learning a little bit. Like I mentioned, like, sometime during 2022, my dad made a comment about the, I don't remember what order of the letters he used, but he said, like, the BGL, I don't know if he said the BGLT flag or something like that, or BLTG flag or something. He's like, something came into our house where it had, like, a bit of a rainbow on it or something, like something in the mail maybe, or in the news, like in a newspaper. And he was like, oh, that's like the BLGT flag or whatever. And I was like, okay, so he kind of knows about it. Kind of. And then that's all he really said. And then I remember him saying that way back that he liked the show Queer Eye. But other than that, I don't think my parents have. And I have a friend who they know that's trans that, I noticed that my mom is accurate with the pronouns lately. Kind of. So I kind of noticed there's a little bit that they're learning, but they're not immersed at all, like, and that kind of thing. And when it even comes to sexuality, like, in general, like, I don't really know, like, they're not very outwardly sexual people. And so, yeah, I just kind of wonder, like, they never talk about it either. And I think they were probably raised like that. And then I'm sure I'm not the only household that the parents never really were teaching their kids. So I wonder if I never really learned in school, like, what I would have learned, how and when, if the school wasn't teaching it as just like a general part of the health class. But I don't think we were learning anything in K through 4. To my knowledge, I don't think we were learning anything at that age. I was definitely having my own life experiences from probably around grade 3 or so and up. But a lot of what I was experiencing, I didn't get any kind of clarification for it. I just started noticing, like, I start having these crushes on these people, and other friends that I talked to weren't having crushes on the same types of people. Like, that's all I really noticed, was that a lot of my friends were guys. A lot of them had crushes on girls. And the girls that I did know, I didn't hang out with most of them, but when I was young, but when I did start hanging out with them a little more, I realized that they didn't tend to think about women or anything. They seemed to kind of, like, not like each other. Like, they were always having, like, conflict and drama and arguments and stuff with their friend groups. So I usually didn't like hanging out with the girl groups too much because they were a little dramatic. I just wanted to play sports. And so, but yeah, like, I don't think I ever had a crush on anybody at school when I was younger. When I think about it, like, I had crushes on, there was that one girl in a play, and that didn't go to our school, and there were some younger age, like, aunts or cousins of one of my soccer teammates. There were a couple people, I think, from church that I was kind of like, I noticed I wanted to be around them a lot and impress them, but it was never really too much more than that. But yeah, I don't really remember if I really, like, understood what was happening with my experience. I don't think I really fully understood it. And I don't know where I learned about homosexuality. I have no idea. All I know is that I knew it, at least by 3rd grade. I knew what it was, because when my friend came out to me, I wasn't, like, confused about what she was saying. She told me she was gay, and I was like, okay, look, cool. And I think she was asking if I was still going to be her friend, and I was like, yeah, it's not a problem. Like, I don't really care. Like, I didn't really care. Like, her being gay didn't really faze me. Like, there was nothing about it that was, like, strange to me. Like, I never really believed a lot of what the church was saying. Whenever they would preach anything hateful, I already knew that was not it. Like, I was like, these people are just prejudiced. Like, I saw that early on in life, that I noticed that, and I'm grateful that I did. But yeah, I don't really think I learned anything in K through 4, and even though I had some stuff that maybe in life was kind of coming up, I think that maybe if the 5th grade and up could have handled it better, then I would have maybe been a little more educated on things. Like, I think the place where I was the most educated, not like over other people or whatever, but I definitely had a lot of education and experience, not education so much, but more like firsthand experience with socializing. I definitely socialized a lot, and that's what I liked. That's what I enjoyed. I socialized all the time. I had fun being interactive and social, and I knew so many different types of people that, I kind of got a vibe for the types of people I like being around, the types of people I'm most comfortable with, just that type of stuff, like how to treat people, how to not be a jerk. Like, yeah, I was a jerk sometimes. I know I was. Like, I was definitely super defensive about things, and, as a teen, I was really sarcastic and all these types of things, but, I kind of learned not to be that way because it wasn't authentic to myself anyways, and I didn't like being that way. It was kind of more like me protecting myself from the jerks of people that I was around at times. Like, they were kind of jerks too, so I kind of had to be a little on the tougher side, but I'm really not one of those, like, tough types of people. But I don't know, I was raised in LA, so it's like, you come across all kinds of people. Like, it's not like the easiest city. You don't want to be, like, too naive. Like, I definitely had street smarts, and like I said, I was hanging out with people of all different socioeconomic classes and things. Like, I wasn't always in the safest of neighborhoods or the safest of places, and so I kind of knew how to present myself in certain environments, and that's kind of more so what it was. Like, when I was around the church people, I knew I couldn't be too, like, open with my emotions or very, like a sensitive person. Like, you kind of had to have your guard up a lot because people would just, like, be on your case about things. So you kind of had to be like that, which was why I never really liked being around those people, because it was always like somebody was always going to try to debate you about some religious topic and get under your skin or whatever, or tell you that you're doing some tradition wrong and want to, like, fight you on it, basically. And it's like, dude, I just ate a piece of bacon. Like, chill. Like, it's not a big deal. I knew I was eating it. Like, I did it on purpose. Like, leave me alone. Like, I don't really care about the rule. But yeah, like, I wonder, like, if I learned about sexual topics at a younger age, like, I don't think it would make me a bad person. Like, there was a lot of stuff that I was definitely aware of and doing at a younger age that nobody even had to teach me. So I don't know. I don't really buy it that, I mean, I do understand that maybe not teaching certain things K through 4, that might be a little young for some kids. And to hear that from, like, a teacher, I don't know. I do think parents should teach their kids that stuff. I mean, that's kind of where my opinions lie on that, is that, it makes sense for parents to teach their kids. It makes a lot of sense to me for parents to teach their children about these things. But yeah, I really don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, I think it's wise to teach kids terms for things that they're going to see in public, so they're not pointing like, what's that, and then you don't have to explain it in the middle of a grocery store. It's like, like, I think I can understand, like, answering questions or explaining the types of people that are around the neighborhood. To me, that just makes logical sense, to educate your kids about the diversity surrounding you. But I don't know, like, if it comes to teaching about, like, acts of sexuality and stuff like that, like, I don't think it has to go that far in K through 4. Like, people don't maybe need to know that, but definitely age appropriate. People need to know what they're experiencing, and they need to know what they're experiencing personally, internally, and they need to know what it is that they're observing around them. And maybe it's easy for me to say, being from a place like LA, raised around LA, San Diego, Orange County, where there's so much diversity. But yeah, like, I do think that the person who made the comment about, teachers not needing to be social workers, I mean, yeah, they don't all need to be social workers, but talking about gender identity and sexual identity is not only the job of a social worker. Like, really? Is that what it's limited to? Like, I can't talk about gender or sexuality because I'm not a social worker? It's not that difficult. Like, it's not like that complex of a topic, There's a terminology side, there's the scientific side. Like, what more do you need? Like, I don't think it really takes that much. You don't have to go back to college and get a whole other degree just to be able to spout out a couple vocabulary terms and point out a picture and be like, this is a type of a gender expression example, and showing pictures of a couple things, like, I don't think that requires a social work degree, like, you could probably write it in a paragraph or two. You could probably give a 5-minute talk and explain the majority of things that a kid would have a question about, based on something they probably saw in society or are experiencing firsthand themselves. Now, I do believe that, maybe they should get social workers involved. Maybe they should. Like, there was a time, I think 6th grade, when we started learning about, like, STDs. Mostly we learned about AIDS and HIV. We didn't learn about anything else at that time, I don't think. But there was a teacher who was the older grade teacher who knew about it. And when we were in 6th grade, we had, like, a seminar where he came in every day for, like, maybe, like, an hour for, like, a 2-week period or something. I don't know. It felt like it was months, but I'm pretty sure it was pretty short. And he came in and would expand and teach us on certain topics about STDs and stuff. And they got someone else who knew how to teach it. I don't know if he went to a training or what. I have no idea. But he was knowledgeable. I mean, he taught different types of sciences and math and PE and stuff. So he was knowledgeable and probably educated himself and was able to teach. I mean, that's what teachers do. They freaking teach. Like, what else are they supposed to do? They have to keep up with the times. They can't just be stuck back, like, teaching stuff that, like, never changes. I mean, like, what happened, right, with Pluto being a planet and not a planet and all that? Like, what, did they just, like, stop? Like, oh, I'm not an astronomer, I can't teach about Pluto anymore? Like, we find out something new about the universe, and now, like, I'm not a physicist, so I can't really teach this. It's like, everyone can learn and teach a basic amount of information, and then, yes, it would be up to the parents and the guardians and the loved ones who are adults to the kids to teach them the values and other things that they want them to learn, for sure. I think a mistake would be to leave it up to the school environment for a kid to first time hear that. I feel like, for myself, I'm not a parent, but I would prefer to be involved in my kid's life to the extent that I know what they do and don't know, that I know what they are and are not exposed to, and that I can explain to them what's happening, what they see, what they're experiencing. I can express that to them. If we're at a store and we see the cashier who has a beard and, has a, long hair and makeup on and long nails and a deep voice and is like 6'11" feet tall or something, and if my kid asks, is this a man or a woman, I would have a response for that. I would explain it to them. I probably would have explained it to them before they came across a person like that in their real life in the first place. But if not, I would explain it to them. I wouldn't be like, oh, like, you're too young to know this. Like, if they're asking the question, it's because they are recognizing it and they want to know. And yes, age appropriate explanations. And I would also explain that, not everybody, there are people out there that, there's a controversy about certain things that's been going on for multiple decades where, there's a lot of gender related things, sexuality related things that, people don't want their kids knowing about, so I would probably caution my own kids to be like, hey, maybe your friends, like, unless you know what your friends' parents want you to talk about with their kids, like, maybe be respectful of their own values and, the needs that they might have. I would probably advise my kids on that and just be like, maybe this is how we talk about this in this household, but, when you go to your friend's household, they might not be comfortable talking about certain things, or whatever, like, but, there's always that kid that knows a lot and teaches all the other kids, and they do that because everybody wants to know. Kids are gonna socialize with other kids, I wouldn't want my kid to be the one that doesn't know anything, who's just completely out there, just like confused and like in the dark and witnessing and observing certain things out in the general public and not really knowing what it is that they're seeing or how to interact with certain types of people, what those people might need. Like, if I have kids, I want them to be loving and kind and caring for humans and animals, but in nature in general. I would want my kids to be accepting of others. I'd want them to be aware that there are dangers out there. There are creepers out there. There are people out there who want to do no good to kids, or other people, and want to take advantage of things. And I would definitely make sure that they know about safety and things, or to report to an adult if they witness any certain types of abusive types of things. But I don't think I would want to just send them out there confused and not knowing, because that, I think, is more dangerous than anything else. I would want my kids to know, and I'd want them to be respectful if they saw a cashier that was dressed differently, or maybe was looking a little different than what other people might wear, or seems a little different in some other way, or if they had like some kind of a disability or some kind of a skin condition or whatever. Like, I wouldn't want to have the rude kid who just like doesn't understand that people are different and is pointing at things or bullying people or whatever. I would be heartbroken if my kid was like a bully or prejudice, against certain groups of people and racist or whatever. Like, that would be on me. I would blame myself for that. I would be like, that's my fault that my kid's fucking prejudiced. Like, that's on me. I should have taught him better. But I don't have kids, but I do think that it's valuable to talk about these kind of topics. And if people are gonna let their kids watch any type of mainstream media or any type of media or socialize in public without them ever, they need to be teaching their kids about the types of stuff that they're going to be seeing, so that the kids don't have to learn it from other places, so that the kids don't learn some other value that you don't want them to learn. Like, I don't want my kids to learn to be prejudiced. I don't want them to learn that. I want them to learn to like fend for themselves and like take care of their safety and be like cautious. But I don't want them to be worried or depressed or anxious, or I don't want them to experience anything negative socially, But that's not possible. I mean, I think everyone who socializes, you put yourself at risk of some type of a painful experience just naturally by doing that, but by interacting with others. But I really do think it would be complex. It's easier said than done. Like, I'm speaking in theories right now, and I don't have any kids. I'm not pregnant. I'm not on my way to having any kids. I don't plan on popping any out. If I had a kid, I don't know how. I mean, that is not biologically possible for the way I live my life. But if I happen to have one and give birth to one, I do think I would take a pretty cautious role. And I would definitely teach my kids about stuff in that K through 4 age range, grade age range. Like, I wouldn't wait until the school taught them in 5th or 6th grade or whatever. I wouldn't rely on the school textbooks. I'd want to see the school's textbooks. I'd want to see what my kids were learning. I'd want to be, knowledgeable about what the teachers know about certain topics. Like, I remember for Black History Month once in like 5th or 6th grade, I wrote a BS paper. I just BS'd my way through this paper about Martin Luther King. I don't know what I wrote, but it was a bunch of false information. I got an A on the paper. My dad read that paper, and he was like, this isn't even accurate. Like, this isn't real. Like, the dates were wrong. Like, I was, like, making up people. And, my dad took that paper to the teacher and was like, this is false. Like, how are you going to give my kid an A on a paper that's not even right? And he wasn't, like, screening all of her homework and stuff, but it was like, I would not want to find out that, my kids were getting A's on papers because my kids' teachers didn't know about Black history, because they didn't know about, sex ed. Like, God only knows what happened on a sex ed paper, a sex ed, quiz or exam, when your teacher's too embarrassed to even, like, talk about it. Like, because I was quite a sexual kid growing up, like, more like internally. I wasn't like outwardly like talking about it all the time or anything, but I definitely had a natural curiosity for sure. Thought about it a lot. Was just curious all around, but kind of learned because of the religion. Like, I wasn't really asking a lot until later on in my life, when I noticed, my other friends were all like hooking up, like in the teen years and stuff. And, I had some friends who were a little bit older at that time too, that were like in college, and, they were like an older generation that once we were in high school, we kind of shared some similar spaces at the church where there was some interaction, where some of our activities we would do with that older crowd, because we were no longer like little kids, but we were no longer like, we weren't able to go to like the older adult boring stuff. And so, if it was like a beach bonfire type of thing or whatever, we would go and interact. And so, like, they had cars and they'd drive around LA and stuff. And I talked about this before, I used to have, those were the friends that I think I probably learned the most about, regarding like just generally like about sexuality and relationships and stuff. Because I hung out with them all the time. I was around them probably like 4 or 5 times a week. And we would mostly just hang out in the cars. We'd like go, chill all over town. But we kind of liked having our space. And I was lucky that, they were older and, they let me be obnoxious and, tag along all the time. And they were nice to me. Like, I never had any issues with them. Like, they were pretty conservative, but they were open-minded enough to answer questions. And they basically were really nice. And, I remember Like, yeah, we would just like go places and talk for like ages. Like, there wasn't a lot we were allowed to do because of the religion, so it's like, we would tend to go and get like food, like takeout or whatever, and there were like picnic tables at this one park at the beach, and we would go to the beach a lot and like eat at the park there, or go to the beach a lot and hang out there, or just hang out in cars, like go to different like outlook spots by the beaches usually, and just like hang out in the car and talk and stuff, listen to music and just like chat, or go hang out at like bookstores and coffee shops and stuff like that. Like, it was pretty mellow with these people. And so there was a lot of conversations going on about like serious topics. And, it wasn't stuff I was talking to my parents about. It wasn't stuff that I was talking to my age range, like friend groups about. And so like, it was I felt like it was like a safe place to like talk to them and stuff. Like, I still like admire them and like that they put up with me and all that kind of stuff. But I don't really think like, I really don't think it's I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think about, like, I really don't think it's too like, I don't think it's very wise to just keep kids in the dark about stuff. Like, I do think there is an age appropriate range for certain topics. But to completely keep them in the dark and assume that that's going to do some good, I don't really think that's going to happen. And for teachers to not want to take more of an active role in making like extreme statements like, oh, we're not social workers, it's like, bro, like, it's not that hard. Learn about Black history, learn about sexuality, learn about gender identity. I mean, just learn about different experiences that different types of humans have. As a teacher, that's your job. Like, you don't have to know like every remote group of tribe that ever existed in the Himalayas or whatever, but it's like, I think if a teacher doesn't know their surroundings, either the surroundings of the types of students, like the types of people that the students are near, or if they don't know like the neighborhood surrounding the school and those demographics, how are they gonna really teach kids like on a social level? Like, some of this stuff becomes social, which is why I think it is such a big issue. Like, some stuff you learn in school, it doesn't become like a social issue. Things like gender, things like sexuality, things like ethnicity, things like language. I mean, these are social, very social topics. And to avoid it, basically, to completely avoid it means that, those kids are going to be left in the dust. I mean, what's going to happen when they go apply for work? When they are in high school and they start wanting to get some money or whatever, and they start being eligible to be able to work. I mean, how are they going to work, if they don't know what types of people are out there? If they can't keep from being prejudiced against queer clientele, or like bosses and supervisors with different gender identities, like, how are they going to know if they're prejudiced against all these different types of people? How are they going to know? And maybe that's taking it too far, because by that point they'll be older, but a lot of this stuff forms when you're younger. A lot of the social comfort forms when you're younger, and to teach your kids to be uncomfortable with certain groups of people is detrimental. I think that, I think it only leads to prejudice. That's the only route I can see it leading to, unless you have a kid. Like, I'm surprised I didn't grow up like, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but like I'm surprised that I am an open-minded person. And maybe it's just in my nature, but I'm surprised by it. I'm surprised. Um, I'm definitely just surprised by, um, considering that I was raised in such a strict religion and in a household with really conservative views and a lot of like strict traditional culture, and expectations. I'm surprised that I didn't buy into the whole, these types of people are going to hell, or those types of people are wrong and bad morally because of how they dress or whatever kind of nonsense that I used to hear around me. Like, there was a lot of stuff I used to hear where I was like, oh, like, I kind of was able to like not agree with it. And I think the thing that made me maybe not agree with it as much is because I knew so many different types of people. Whenever somebody was like, this type of person is like evil or wrong or bad, I was like, but I know one that's not. Like, when everyone, near September 11, when society started kind of getting really strict on Muslims and prejudice towards them, I had some Midwest uncles who were very concerned that, we were living in diverse LA. And I remember getting in an argument about one of my uncles who was like trying to forbid me to hang out with my Muslim friends. And I was like, you don't know them, and they're nice. They're perfectly kind people. They're probably nicer than all my Christian friends. And they were nicer. Their families were totally nice to us. Like, they were so sweet and nice and humble and amazing people. They were like, how you meet some people in life and they just like change your perspective. Like, these kids were the ones that honestly changed my perspective that a teen who's religious can actually be good and nice to people and not have to be a jerk and not have to keep their guard up and not have to be like sarcastic towards people and just trying to bring people down and point out all their faults and stuff. Like, I was raised around Christian people who were just totally like mean. And of course, like, I had friends, like, they were nice enough that like, I can complain about it easily now, but they were nice enough that it wasn't like I need to like not hang out with these people anymore. Like, it wasn't at that level, but nobody was telling them to stop. Nobody was telling them, hey, be nice. Hey, don't backstab each other. Hey, maybe keep this confidential to yourself and don't spread it to the whole school. There was nobody like helping them be accountable for their social actions. And I felt like the Muslim kids, they were more of an example to me. Like, I saw how they were acting, and they were at this Christian school, but I saw how they were acting, and I was like inspired to be better socially. Like, they're probably the first place where I was like, oh, like, I can keep my mouth shut if somebody's like getting on my case about something, and just take, not be argumentative and not be like trying to debate and like win an argument. And I can be kind towards people and gentle towards people and not have to be so like the other way that I thought that I kind of had to be. Like, they opened my eyes to a whole different social world where I was just like, whoa, you can still go out, have fun, have your religion, run around town, do all the stuff that even the church says don't do, and still be a perfectly good person. I can go to any kind of movie, listen to any kind of music, eat. Like, I think they had dietary restrictions, but I never really knew much about what they did for their religious practices or anything. Like, I knew they celebrated Ramadan. Some of them went to mosque, others didn't. Some of them read the Quran, others didn't. There's like a range of like religious people, and they were the first people, surprisingly, that I wonder what would have happened if I never would have met those kids. I wonder how I would have been socially if I'd never had any firsthand example of how to be just like a nice, polite, kind human towards all types of people. Like, I learned that from them. I didn't learn that at church. I didn't learn that from any church leaders or school people or anybody. From my parents, nothing like that. And so, like, they weren't discriminating against people, nothing like that. They would keep their mouths shut if they had a difference of opinion. They would, you know, not get into arguments. Just, you know, they would never, like, say something that would put somebody down, even, like, slightly or sarcastically. They would never be like, oh, like, look at your shoes, they're ugly. Like, haha, just kidding. Like, they'd never say stuff like that. They really had themselves socially in check. Like, they totally were in check and weren't just, like, flying off the handles all the time. And I really admired them for that. And, you know, I had family members in other states that were, like, at some point being like, oh, like, don't talk to them. Like, they're not good for you to be around. And I'm just thinking, like, they're probably the best people for me to be around. Shoot. Like, they were better than everybody else I knew. Like, and I'm not talking about, like, following the Bible and all that stuff. Like, they were just good humans. Like, they would see people. They would be in need. They would volunteer their time, their effort. The work that they put in was always, like, good effort. You know, they tried hard in school. Like, they were a good example. And they never talked about their religion. They never preached once. They never invited to their religious environment. I remember once being so inspired by one of my friends in one of the classes, because another student was, like, on his case and being like, oh, you're wrong because you're Muslim and all this other stuff. And I was just like, you know, I don't really know about the religion and why people would say it's wrong, because they look like they're enjoying their lives and very healthy and very wholesome people. And so I remember asking my friend if I could borrow his Quran, because I didn't know what it was. And I took the Quran to the library to ask them to get another one of those books. I borrowed a Quran from the library, gave him back his book the next day, and started reading the Quran. And, you know, of course I didn't fully understand everything, but I was like, okay, there's a little bit of Jesus in here, there's a little bit of Moses in here, there's a little bit of familiarity, but all the stories were completely different in their own little ways. And so I kind of understood, okay, we definitely had a lot of commonalities, but the difference that I saw was that socially, they put it into practice socially in their day-to-day life, versus the people I knew were more likely to kind of, like, take it to another level. And instead of practicing, you know, how you treat people, they practiced, you know, knowing what the Bible would say and telling people how they're wrong and debating about it. That was more of their concern, was trying to, like, prove people wrong or prove themselves right, or, like, show that they're, like, following the traditions. It wasn't so much how you would, like, treat everybody. And I was more inspired by seeing people treat other people kindly, just because I liked that environment. And once I noticed that there were people like that existed, I was like, I want those types of people in my life. I don't care if it's a religion or what. Like, I want more of that and less of the types of situation I was dealing with. So definitely that was life-changing to me. And to have people that were telling me, you know, don't hang out with those people just because they claim a certain religion, I was just like, they don't even talk about their religion, you know, and they're doing so much good and they're so kind and nice to everybody all the time, that it was just like, it was just very eye-opening for me. And, you know, I feel like those types of experiences were really helpful for my life, but I don't really know, like, you know, like, I've definitely been around prejudiced people, like, whether it's people who are prejudiced against other religions, other ethnicities, other races, other language groups, other socioeconomic groups, other, just any different type of person. Like, I grew up with people around people, family and friends, who were really prejudiced or just not understanding of different types types of people. And, you know, there was a time in my life where I was kind of like, white people this, white people that, you know, like when I started recognizing, okay, there's definitely a difference to how I get treated sometimes, or what certain people think about me. Like, I did start noticing that my experience was different. When I would go to the mall, I was treated differently than some of my other friends, depending who I was there with. You know, we'd walk in the mall, security would ask for our IDs and stuff like that. It's like, I just came in the mall. Like, why do you need my ID? You know what I mean? It's like, what does that have to do with anything? You know, like things like that, where it's like, oh, you want my ID, but you don't want any of my other white friends' IDs? Like, we're all here together. You know, like, there would be stuff like that where I would be like, okay, something's definitely up. And I did kind of develop a little bit of animosity about it for probably about a year. And then I realized that the majority of people I knew were white, and I was, you know, we were all good. So I was kind of like, okay, well, that, you know, that belief doesn't really stand. But yeah, that was one of the things I had noticed. But yeah, I'm just definitely surprised that I'm glad, but surprised that I didn't come out like super prejudiced, because I definitely had opportunity to be prejudiced. But yeah, almost every time when somebody tells me, oh, this group of people or that group of people, like nowadays, I'm like, dude, I know so many different types of people, so many different types of groups that, you know, it doesn't really, all the prejudices don't really stand, you know, like I can kind of see through them. But I feel like when people don't have those experiences and they're not educated about what they might experience, they're going to just automatically assume, you know, don't be around that, don't be polite to that type of person, don't be respectful, these people are less than you, you don't have to, you know, consider their feelings or their rights, or if you're committing crimes against them, just, you know, they're almost not even human, and even if they are, they're going to hell for whatever reason. Usually that's part of the conversation, that someone's always trying to end up in hell. But I do think it's a bit extreme. I don't think we need extremism, but I wouldn't say that you know, as I'm taking it, I don't think that the K through 4 learning about sexuality and sexual activity is, maybe for most kids, like, they don't have to learn it at school. I wouldn't push it that early either. I wouldn't necessarily say take it out of schools, but I would say maybe have an option, and if kids are asking questions, maybe revisit it, or at least bring it up to the parent that the kid wants to know about that kind of thing because they're asking, or something. Like, there needs to be something. Like, I don't think it should be completely just ignore it until 5th grade and up. Because kids that age range do have questions, and they do have certain experiences going on. So I wouldn't say completely avoid it, but I would say, you know, the sex ed that I learned in 5th and 6th grade wouldn't be appropriate for a kindergartner or a 2nd grader or a 3rd grader. Maybe a 3rd grader. Maybe a 3rd grader, 4th grader could probably understand it. I feel like it was at maybe 3rd or 4th grade level. Like, it wasn't that complex, but I feel like because of when I started hitting puberty, it probably would have helped to have more information earlier on, and my parents were pretty useless with that kind of stuff. So I never even asked them. Like, I kind of knew that it just wasn't okay to talk about certain stuff. I grew up like that. Like, you just don't talk about certain stuff. Like, even still, we don't. And that for me does create a lot of, like, frustration with trying to communicate with my parents because it's such a weird level of communication that I'm not used to anymore. Like, I was previously, growing up, used to not talking about anything serious and not, bringing up anything controversial or challenging anything or talking about real topics of current situations that people are going through. But then, I went to school forever and was working in psych for a while, and most of my friends work in psychology, and we talk. That's what we do. It's a field where you talk as your job. You talk all the time. And so I got used to talking about and used to getting comfortable about talking about so many things because I did it every day. I had so many different types of clients, queer clients, trans clients, all types of clients. I had clients that preferred to work with me even though I didn't really even speak Spanish and their primary language was Spanish. And I'm like, you like me because I'm nice to you and we have a good rapport, but at a certain extent, I was like, are you sure you don't want an interpreter? But, their English was good. It was good enough that, we could understand one another, but I could tell that they didn't really use English much and things like that. So it was I was used to, talking to all types of people with hearing impairments, people who couldn't read, people who couldn't write, people who couldn't see, people who couldn't hear, people who couldn't speak properly, people who could barely even move or walk or anything. So I've had clients, not often, but I've had clients that had catatonic states. Clients with manic episodes, clients that, were responding to internal stimuli, all sorts of things would be going on. And I just got used to, this is just how it is, I'm working with all these diverse groups of people. And then to come out of that and having to try to talk to, my parents or something, of people who really shelter themselves about their views in the world and what's appropriate for conversation and all this kind of stuff. It's the majority of life experiences are off limits to speak about with them. And to me, it's I just rather not have a conversation, It's well, we're not talking about anything anyways, so okay, bye, It's kind of I just get more frustrated by it. It's okay, yeah, talk to me about your errands. It's I got a lot going on in my mind sometimes, and then it's but we can't talk about any of that. So to me, it's kind of it's just a frustration to have to deal with. And I don't think I think that's most of my opinions on this topic and things that are relevant to it. Is I mostly worry about people not being educated about what is going on in reality in society, and them having to shelter themselves or feel overly aggressive towards people that they don't understand. I mean, I'm a minority on so many different levels that I've experienced so much discrimination on so many different levels that I know for a fact most of it comes from people not knowing other people like me. The people who are discriminating against me because I'm black, it's usually because they don't have a lot of black family or black neighbors or black friends or anybody black in their lives. If they did, they probably wouldn't be reacting like that. The people who discriminate based on maybe gender expression, presentation, different types of sexuality things, it's because, they just don't want to really get to know a person, for who they are. They need everyone to fit into the box that they learned, and they don't have enough experience, and I feel you know, that's where hate crimes come from, you know. And if people teach their kids that kind of stuff, you know, if it's my generation and the next generation teaching K through fourth grade, you know, and not teaching them any of these things, I mean, they're basically ain't gonna have to fend for themselves. And, you know, I don't know, it's kind of easy for me to say maybe living in like a major city, because I see so much diversity around me so much of the time that I feel like you wouldn't be a very functional person living in LA and not knowing anything. You know, you'd be very behind in life and confused and not happy probably. So I don't really know, like, but I think that's mostly what I think, honestly. I've been going on and on about this for so long now, but yeah, I kind of see it just, you know, if people avoid teaching, that's dangerous. But yeah, age appropriate makes sense. And I would agree that, you know, the schools shouldn't be the ones that are teaching the kids all this information, but there are going to be those parents who don't teach. I had parents that didn't teach anything, and I don't know what I would have learned or how or where I would have learned things, but I wouldn't have learned it in my household. So I don't really know where I would have learned sex ed if it wasn't for school. That was probably a starting place, but because, you know, a lot of sexual topics do come up with like church and stuff, I think we talked about it a lot through like, you know, youth groups and stuff, but I just don't remember. But yeah, well, I'm gonna stop this recording because it's going on way too long.